We'll bring Lloyd up. Does a good job covering the NFL, contributing reporter for the NFL Network. Do you know where I stand with these draft rates, Lloyd? You know.
Q. Yeah, I kind of agree with Q. You and I talked years ago, and all the time we say 2 to 3 years to evaluate a draft. So many times a guy could look good as a rookie or whatever you have, he could get hurt, and it just doesn't pan out. And we know 50% of these guys just aren't going to make it. They may look good day one, but once they get there, are they going to be able to answer the bright lights of the NFL?
Yeah, and listen, the big question or the question mark or the criticism with the Philadelphia Eagles is that people believe that they drafted an injured player in Jones, a player coming off injury. But if this kid doesn't get injured, he's arguably one of the top cornerbacks on the board. I mean, first of all, it seems as though he's healthy. He can overcome this injury. I think he's going to make an impact when and if he's healthy and he's able to go for the Philadelphia Eagles. So let me get your thoughts on Jones first, and then we'll go and get your thoughts on the DE out of Tennessee, Barnett.
Yeah, Sidney Jones is a guy we know. He was a great cover corner, and the Eagles had their eye on him right away, even going into that pro day when he got hurt. So I think it's great value at the number 43 pick. They did not go crazy for him. We've seen the Eagles a lot of times panic, trade up, and kind of give away their draft, but they stayed pat. He fell on their lap, and let's face it, the guy with that Achilles injury, he's a young guy, so he's going to probably be able to bounce back by it, and he'll probably be able to play during the season. The problem won't put him on a physically unable to perform list, and then go from there. So I think it was a good situation for them, and let's face it, they need cornerback help.
They do. They drafted a running back, wide receiver as well. We mentioned Barnett, the DE out of Tennessee. There was rumblings if there were certain players on the board where the Eagles going to draft them, where they were position-wise. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, this was a draft that was really spearheaded by Joe Douglas, and we're kind of seeing, I don't want to say the changing of the guard with the Eagles, but Howie Roseman starting to know and understand his place. There's a reason that the Eagles went out and they hired Douglas because he's a guy that's extremely active. He's a personnel guy. He understands player personnel. And then you have Howie kind of sit in the background and do the numbers. So it looks like on paper it'll be a good fit. But did you kind of get the sense that, hey, this draft, certainly this is where Douglas put his stamp on it?
Right, and you took the words right out of my mouth in terms of the Eagles situation in their front office. They finally understood that they needed to get high-value players and kind of stay in the slots where they were, not do all these ridiculous trading up, trading back that they've done in the past, and just let these guys fall to them. Joe Douglas, to his credit, he grabbed a lot of big school guys that have played in the bigger conferences. Let's face it, the bigger conferences are now the minor leagues of the NFL, and these guys should be ready to come in and contribute day one, particularly like Derek Barnett, a guy that's going to be able to rush the pass or help out Brandon Graham and also push Vinny Curry. So I think he's going to help out a lot. And then they particularly hit, I thought West Virginia well. They took two guys from there.
What did you think of the movement early on in the draft? I mean, overall, the fact that John Lynch pulled the bluff of all bluffs, right? And they made it seem like all these teams were calling San Francisco. Later on, we find out no one really called San Francisco in regards to that number 2 pick. So the Bears, people can say they panicked, they overreached. I believe this: if Pace was going to hold true to his convictions and they wanted Mitchell Trubisky, then so be it. They felt that he was not going to be there at 2 because we know what was going to happen at number 1. And he also felt maybe if the Browns were going to get him at 1, maybe it just made them think to themselves, wow, they didn't take him. Now we really have an opportunity to grab him. So I know people are killing, they're just killing Chicago for what they did. They overreached. We know that. Okay, that's fine. Is it more of an indictment on them going from 3 to 2, or is it an indictment on them going 3 to 2 and then drafting Trubisky, who obviously a lot of draft experts are not enamored by him?
Well, Mitchell Trubisky is a quarterback. We know he has raw skills, but he just has not played a lot of football games. And as you're saying, Ryan Pace is the guy that became enamored with him, and now they're kind of attached to the hip. He better have gotten this thing right. He gave up a 3rd and a 4th this year, a 3rd next year. Not a lot in terms of value, because we've seen teams like the Houston Texans trade their first pick for to move up, but it was a situation where this is his guy, and he's going to live and die with him. Other than him, other than Trubisky, he didn't get a lot in the draft, I thought. But Chicago is a team trying to rebuild, but it's going to be interesting to see how Trubisky handles Mike Glennon there, a guy who they signed to a $19 million contract for this season, how those two compete with each other, and does that factor into everything?
Couple minutes talking a little NFL with Lloyd Vance again, 12:30 on a Tuesday edition of Middays with Q. Rich Quinones here. We'll take you up to 2 on 97.3 ESPN FM. I thought the Jets had a pretty solid pick, even though they went safety with 2 of their picks. The Giants were intriguing to me because they still, as much as people want to say their offensive line is going to be okay, and they got a deep draft pick in the latter rounds, potentially maybe a versatile player for their offensive line. It doesn't matter all the weapons they have. If they cannot keep their quarterback upright, if they can't pass block and run block, then you're going to see another year where the defense is going to have to carry them and the offense is going to struggle.
Yeah, and that player was Adam Biswani, I guess that's how you pronounce that, but they got him in later on, and he's a guy that's going to help them provide depth. But I did like what the Giants did. Jerry Reese, let's face it, a guy that's been around the NFL a long time, Super Bowl winner, and he got some quality guys. I was kind of surprised he went tight end in the first round, but now you add him to the mix of this explosive receiver set, and this team really is just probably going to take off in terms of driving the football down the field. So I like that pick. And then they took one of my favorite players, Dalvin Tomlinson, a former wrestler in high school, a guy that's going to provide some leverage in the middle there. So I thought they did a nice job.
Yeah, and everyone thinks, you had another weapon with Ingram. I'll tell you what's kind of interesting is they draft quarterback Davis Webb. I still think Eli's got a couple more years left. They're eventually going to need his replacement, but the kid Gallman, the running back out of Clemson, they already named Perkins the starter going forward. That can be another change of pace back. Overall, how about Allen slipping to the Washington Redskins, and then we'll get to the Cowboys in a moment, but how about Washington's draft?
Yeah, Washington did a solid job, and I was pretty surprised because, they just fired their general manager, and now Bruce Allen kind of came back in control there. Jonathan Allen was sitting there waiting for them, probably one of the number one guys on the board to begin with. Everybody talked about this potential shoulder injuries, this and that with him, but stud player, so they grabbed him. And then they just had solid picks down the line the rest of the way. I did like Samaje Perine coming at the running back position because they don't seem to be enamored too much with Matt Jones anymore. So they provided quality depth to this team, and they're going to be very competitive.
And you look at the Cowboys, their first 6 draft picks, 3 of them were cornerbacks. So they went DE, corner, wide out, safety, and Woods out of La Tech, and then they went Marquez White, who I think is going to be a contributor eventually, the cornerback from Florida State, even though they grabbed him in round number 6. But how about the move for the defensive end, Taco Charlton? I think, too, they were probably looking at other cornerbacks. The problem is everything was in flux the first 6 or 7 draft picks.
Yeah, and Dallas, let's face it, with Greg Hardy's situation, it didn't work out. They've never really replaced DeMarcus Ware, so they grabbed Taco Charlton, the guy with that high motor that you like. He's coming from Michigan, is able to drive the edge, and then they got those corners to help out that secondary. They got beat over and over again. You may see them trade Orlando Scandrick because they are trying to rebuild that deep defense around that secondary, and this is a quality team who saw that they had to stop other people. So Dallas continued to try to build themselves.
What did you make? It seemed as though this year it was a little more prominent, Lloyd, that there were so many notable players that obviously their draft stock dropped dramatically because of off-the-field issues, a ton of red flags, whether it was Cook, whether it was Mixon, who we'll get to in a moment, whether it was Conley as well. And I know there's still conflicting reports with Conley. I mean, the Raiders, they really took a shot. They put themselves out there drafting this kid because now his lawyer is claiming that it was consensual sex occurred. He claims it was consensual, but then now you're hearing that the NFL is not going to have this kid be subject to any type of discipline for, quote, pre-draft misconduct, which kind of tells you, okay, well, you take it off the field for a moment, and if charges are still going to be filed and not dropped, even though this kid's claiming his innocence, this can still be an issue for the Raiders because there's no guarantee he's going to be on the field.
Yeah, and we know the commissioner's office will backtrack. We know them. If this situation becomes very grave and it does look like he's going to be convicted or anything like that, they're definitely going to take a different stance. And what you were saying is, a lot of times these guys with these red flags, they talk a big game that they're not going to touch him. They're going to stay away from him. But in the end, a lot of these young men have made mistakes, and we saw them given a second opportunity. I know we're going to talk about Mixon soon. But you saw that with the Cincinnati Bengals. They just continually give guys a chance, and our organization's able to handle that. So some teams won't touch a guy like that, and then other ones will say, you know what, let's bring him into our system. We can probably change what he's going to do.
Hey, listen, I'm not going to waver on what I said. If anyone drafted or whomever drafted Delvin Cook or Joe Mixon because we knew they were going to slide, ultimately they were going to be steals. But I wouldn't have drafted Mixon. I wouldn't have. And if I'm the Bengals, if I'm Cincinnati, I certainly wouldn't have drafted this kid. First of all, they've already got a bunch of running backs on the team. You've got Marvin Lewis. They're coming off a 6-9-1 record. You've got Lewis on the hot seat. You got Dalton on the hot seat. I know they had some offensive players that were nicked up. They've been inconsistent. But you look at the Burfects. You look at Mixon. Now you look at and Pac-Man Jones. I mean, it's like, out of all the teams in the NFL, why Cincinnati?
Yeah, that's a team that doesn't have a plan, and we see it over and over again. They probably have the small scouting department in the National Football League, and they just kind of grab guys that kind of look good on paper and then kind of figure everything out from there. But if we remember that playoff game a couple of years ago where Burfict and Jones both exploded against the Steelers, you know, you just hope this situation doesn't come to head with Mixon as well. You know, that's kind of a crazy environment with the Bengals, and you know, I know teams like the Steelers and the Patriots just wouldn't have touched them either.
Listen, I think that game, I honestly thought Marvin Lewis was going to get fired. Last one for you. So you got the whole situation with Teddy Bridgewater. It's unfortunate. It really is because, you know, you want to be able to protect a player, right? And you want to be able to go to bat for the player. He had a horrific injury. So the fact that they're declining his fifth-year option, it doesn't really have an effect on whether he's going to be able to resume his career with Minnesota. I think the question is he going to be able to resume his NFL career? Like, I look at it in a broader picture. You know, the fact that this kid is really lucky he still has one of his legs is really a testament to that training staff and the doctors on site when he got injured. But this is the NFL. And let's be honest, you're talking about $12.2 million. You're rolling the dice. That's your wager right there. And you got to bank on him being completely healthy, if that. Now, I don't know. I mean, the expectation, that's why they have Bradford. That's why they drafted Cook as well, because they lost AP. First of all, no one knows when this kid's going to step back out on the field again. No one knows if he's ever going to be healthy. It's an unfortunate situation all around, but at the end of the day, that's the NFL, right? That's the league that we know and we've covered for years. It's a business.
Yeah, and it's a harsh business too, and unfortunately, that's what we see sometimes. And this is a business, as you were saying. You know, Bridgewater, great kid. Everybody's rooting for him. Coming out of Louisville, just stepping up, did a great job his first couple of years. But that's a horrific injury, nerve damage all throughout his leg. And we saw that with Robert Edwards for the Patriots, who was a great running back, and he just never really came back from it. So, you know, hopefully Bridgewater will be able to come back from this. But let's face it, Zimmer and the rest of the Vikings staff, they moved on. They got Bradford from the Eagles. He was serviceable, and they're trying to build his team back up around the players that they have that are available. So hopefully Bridgewater will keep working with their training staff, and he'll be able to surprise some people and get back on the field. But right now, this team is just trying to compete with the Green Bay Packers.
All right, pal. Great stuff as always. Keep it going. We'll talk next week. Have a good weekend. I appreciate a couple moments.
All right. Thanks for having me on.